quiet suburban neighborhood, Sarah and her family thought they had finally found their dream home. Nestled among tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors, the quaint house seemed like the perfect place to raise their children and build a life together. However, their idyllic existence was about to take a dark and twisted turn. It all began when a new family moved into the house next door. At first, Sarah greeted her new neighbors with a warm smile and a plate of freshly baked cookies, eager to extend the hand of friendship. But as the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold. Late at night, Sarah would lie awake in bed, listening to unsettling whispers drifting through the walls from the direction of the neighbor's house. At first, she dismissed them as figments of her imagination, the product of an overactive mind in the dead of night. But as the whispers grew louder and more persistent, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, objects around the house started to go missing, only to reappear in odd and unexpected places. Sarah would find her keys in the refrigerator, her daughter's favorite toy tucked away in the attic, as if moved by some unseen hand. At first, she chalked it up to absent-mindedness or the forgetfulness of a busy household. But when even the family dog began to act strangely, growling and barking at empty corners of the room, Sarah knew that something sinister was afoot. One fateful day, as Sarah was tending to her garden in the backyard, she caught a glimpse of her neighbor through the slats of the fence. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. His lips curled into a sinister smile that chilled her to the bone. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as they locked eyes, the air thick with an unspoken menace that hung between them like a dark cloud. Terrified, Sarah retreated into the safety of her home, her heart pounding in her chest as she barricaded the doors and windows against the outside world. She knew then that they had to leave, that they could no longer stay in the shadow of their disturbing neighbor. In the dead of night, under the cover of darkness, Sarah and her family packed their belongings and fled from the house next door, leaving behind the nightmare that had consumed their once peaceful existence. But even as they drove away, the memory of their disturbing neighbor lingered like a dark specter, haunting their dreams and casting a shadow over their future. Though they found solace in a new home far away from the horrors of their past, Sarah and her family could never truly escape the chilling reminder of the house next door. For in the quiet suburban neighborhood where they once felt safe and secure, the darkness still lurked, waiting patiently for its next unsuspecting victim. Mark had always been a skeptic. Living in the serene suburban neighborhood for years, he often brushed off the rumors and whispers that circulated among the neighbors. However, there was one rumor that he couldn't shake off: the unsettling tales surrounding his reclusive neighbor, Mr. Johnson. It started innocently enough, with murmurs of strange noises emanating from Mr. Johnson's house at odd hours of the night. Some claimed to have heard the sound of muffled screams echoing from within, while others swore they caught glimpses of shadowy figures skulking in the darkness. At first, Mark dismissed these stories as the product of overactive imaginations or the result of too many late-night horror movies. But as the whispers grew louder and more persistent, he began to wonder if there might be some truth to the rumors after all. Determined to uncover the truth, Mark embarked on a clandestine mission to unravel the mysteries hidden within the walls of Mr. Johnson's home. Under the cover of darkness, he ventured into the backyard of the imposing house next door, his heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The air was thick with anticipation as he approached the back porch, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. As he reached the porch, he noticed a loose floorboard nestled beneath a pile of discarded leaves. With a sense of apprehension, he knelt down and pried the board free. revealing a narrow staircase leading downwards into the darkness below. Without hesitation, Mark descended into the abyss, his pulse quickening with each step. The stairs creaked beneath his weight as he descended deeper into the bowels of the earth, the air growing colder with each passing moment. Finally, he reached the bottom and found himself standing in a dimly lit basement. The walls lined with rows upon rows of photographs. With a sense of dread creeping over him, Mark approached the nearest wall and examined the images plastered upon it. To his horror, he realized that they were photographs of his neighbors, each one staring back at him with empty, soulless eyes. But it wasn't just the photographs that unnerved him. It was what had been done to them. The eyes of each person had been crudely scratched out, leaving behind nothing but empty voids that seemed to stare accusingly back at him. As Mark stood frozen in horror, he heard the sound of footsteps echoing from the darkness beyond, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching, heart pounding in his chest. He whirled around to confront the intruder, only to come face to face with Mr. Johnson himself, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. For a moment, they stood locked in a silent standoff, the tension thick between them. And then, with a menacing grin, Mr. Johnson spoke, his voice dripping with malice. "You shouldn't have come here, Mark," he said, his words sending a chill down Mark's spine. "You've stumbled upon something you were never meant to see." With a surge of adrenaline, Mark turned and fled from the basement, his mind racing with the realization that he was in grave danger. He emerged into the night air, gasping for breath as he sprinted toward safety, the echoes of Mr. Johnson's laughter ringing in his ears. In the days that followed, Mark reported his findings to the police. But by then, it was too late. Mr. Johnson had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a legacy of fear and paranoia that would haunt the neighborhood for years to come. As for Mark, the memory of what he had seen in the secret basement would stay with him forever, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic neighborhood. And though Mr. Johnson may have disappeared into the shadows, his sinister legacy would live on, casting a long and terrifying shadow over the lives of all who had crossed his path. Laura thought she had found the perfect haven when she moved into her new apartment building, nestled in a bustling neighborhood. The building exuded an air of warmth and camaraderie, and Laura's initial impression of her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, only solidified her belief that she had struck gold. From the moment Laura first crossed paths with Mrs. Thompson, she was met with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. Mrs. Thompson seemed friendly and welcoming, always eager to strike up a conversation or offer a helping hand to her new neighbor. Laura couldn't help but feel grateful for the sense of community that Mrs. Thompson brought to their shared living space. But as the days turned into weeks, Laura began to notice subtle shifts in Mrs. Thompson's behavior that left her feeling unsettled. It started innocently enough. Mrs. Thompson would show up unannounced at Laura's door, claiming that she had heard strange noises coming from her apartment. Laura brushed it off at first, chalking it up to the quirks of apartment living and the shared walls that separated their units. However, things took a sinister turn when Laura began to find threatening notes tucked beneath her door, each one more ominous than the last. The messages were cryptic and menacing, filled with veiled threats and warnings that sent chills down Laura's spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, lurking in the shadows just beyond her reach, fearing for her safety. Laura reached out to the building manager, hoping to put an end to the harassment once and for all. But what she discovered sent shockwaves rippling through her entire being. Mrs. Thompson had been dead 4 years, her apartment sitting empty and untouched since her passing. The true identity of the person who had been lurking next door remained a mystery. leaving Laura to grapple with the unsettling realization that she had been living in the shadow of a ghost. As Laura delved deeper into the mystery surrounding Mrs. Thompson, she found herself consumed by a sense of dread that seemed to seep into every corner of her existence. The once vibrant neighborhood now felt suffocating, its streets lined with shadows that seemed to whisper her name in hushed tones. Haunted by the threatening notes and the chilling realization that her neighbor had been dead for years, Laura's sense of unease only grew stronger with each passing day. Sleep became elusive, her nights spent in a state of restless vigilance as she listened for any sign of the unseen presence that lurked just beyond her door. But it was during one particularly harrowing night that Laura's worst fears were realized, as she lay in bed, her thoughts consumed by the enigma of Mrs. Thompson and the ominous messages that had plagued her existence. She heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness. Heart pounding in her chest, Laura strained her ears, trying to discern the source of the noise. The footsteps drew closer, their rhythm slow and deliberate, like the approach of an unseen predator stalking its prey. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Laura realized that she was not alone. In the dim glow of the moonlight, a figure materialized at the foot of her bed, its features obscured by the shadows that danced across its face. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she watched in horror, unable to tear her gaze away from the apparition that loomed before her. And then, with a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the grave, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have come here, Laura," it said, its words sending shivers down her spine. "You've stumbled upon something you were never meant to discover." With a surge of terror coursing through her veins, Laura recoiled in horror, her mind racing with the realization that she was face to face with the ghost of Mrs. Thompson herself. The friendly neighbor she had once trusted had been nothing more than a facade, a mask hiding the malevolent spirit that now stood before her. As the ghost of Mrs. Thompson advanced towards her, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light, Laura knew that she had to escape. With a scream of terror, she fled from her apartment, the echoes of Mrs. Thompson's laughter ringing in her ears as she raced into the night. In the days that followed, Laura struggled to come to terms with the horrors she had witnessed. She moved away from the apartment building, hoping to leave behind the nightmare that had consumed her existence. But try as she might, she could never shake the feeling that the ghost of Mrs. Thompson still lingered in the shadows, watching and waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to cross her path. And so, the true identity of the person lurking next door remained a mystery, leaving Laura to wonder what other secrets her neighbor had been hiding. For in the heart of the bustling neighborhood lay a darkness that few dared to acknowledge, a darkness that threatened to consume anyone who dared to venture too close. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss out on our latest investigations into the world of horror.